The elite adventurers party, Dawn, had just informed Chamber that he was being kicked out, leaving Chamber horrified. The witch Martha and the mage Naru sneered, claiming he was just a dead weight to the party with no useful skills or powers. Then they told Jane that the only skill Chamber received from the goddess was the useless level-up skill. They argued he wasn't worthy of the party, while the rest of them all had impressive skills, especially Jane, who was granted the hero skill. Jane, horrified, put her hands on Martha and Naru's shoulders and asked where Chamber was now. Neither of them knew, nor did they care. As for Jane, she felt like her world had just shattered. Elsewhere, Chamber was venting his anger by fighting monkey-like creatures called orcs. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about being kicked out of the party, which only made him more ferocious as he faced the orcs. He cut them down one after another. He was panting, but felt a sense of relief, knowing he was strong enough to fight on his own. He pressed on, each slash becoming more ruthless. But suddenly, a monster struck him from behind, landing a blow to his head, sending him staggering in pain. The monster prepared to strike again, as Chamber remembered Martha and Naru's words, calling him their dead weight. Rage flared up, causing Chamber to tighten his grip on his sword, and he plunged it straight into the monster's chest. He had defeated the last orc, but collapsed to the ground. With his last breath, he looked up at the sky, thinking this was the end for him. As his vision faded, a sudden voice rang out, announcing that he had leveled up. Chamber was confused, but felt his body being restored. He checked his wounds and found they had all vanished. He wondered what had just happened and where that voice came from. A glowing panel appeared before him, and Chamber realized the words and numbers on it were his stats, displayed as numerical values. He suddenly realized this was his level up, and the panel showed that his physical abilities had improved. Chamber was thrilled, knowing his skill would make him unstoppable. He jumped for joy, finally realizing the true potential of his power. He threw himself into fighting monsters for days on end, everywhere he could. With every monster he defeated, he felt his body become lighter and faster, and he could even use magic now, something he couldn't do before. He defeated orcs just like before, but this time it took almost no effort before they fell. He cheered at his progress, thinking he could do this forever. However, one day he realized his level wasn't increasing anymore, no matter how many monsters he fought. He lay in bed, wondering if it was because he had fought the same monsters too many times, and they were no longer a challenge for his strengthened body. Even so, he didn't want to give up and was determined to become even stronger. Chamber went to the Adventurers Guild to find a quest that would help him get stronger, but all he found were dull community service requests. He asked the receptionist, Nyako, a tiger beast woman, to find him a more difficult and interesting quest. Tired of his persistence, Nyako told him to stop bothering her. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from a group behind them. They saw an adventurer priestess looking stunned as she was kicked out of her party. The party leader told her she was useless and a disappointment to him. The scene reminded Chamber of when he had been kicked out of his own party. The priestess tried to follow her old party, but she gave up, stopping and crying in front of the crowd. Chamber approached her and with a bright smile told her she could join his party. The crowd was surprised. Many began to jeer, making her even more embarrassed. The adventurers mocked her for already finding a babysitter, and they laughed at how the two of them were a perfect match for each other. Chamber led his new companion to the tavern. There, he encouraged her to raise a glass in celebration, trying to cheer her up. She smiled at his efforts, and they toasted together. He introduced himself, and she said her name was Exile, a D-rank adventurer. Chamber replied that he was currently C rank, although his skills were more like those of a D rank. As if comparing who was more pathetic, she loudly declared that she was only E rank, which was even worse. She sadly explained that she was a priestess whose weak healing magic was no better than a healing potion. She suddenly yelled that she was useless. Chamber understood that feeling, thinking to himself that he had been in her shoes before. Without warning and devoid of emotion, Isle stated that she needed 30 more points to level up. Isle's eyes widened as if she were waking up from a trance. She hurriedly apologized and explained that she uncontrollably says random things due to her divine oracle skill, which she considered useless. Chamber stared at Isle, trying to process what she had just said about how to level up. He stood up, took her by the shoulders, and said resolutely that he needed her, no matter what. Elsewhere, Martha was kicking another member out of the Dawn Party. The shocked member listened to her barrage of criticism. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the sword at his hip and was about to draw it. Martha shot a fire spell right next to him, threateningly forcing him to stand still. He had no choice but to leave. Jane watched the scene, thinking his teammates were being too hard on the new member. Martha and Naru just laughed, saying their party only deserved the best. Jane reflected thoughtfully, noticing his teammates had grown arrogant because their granted skills made them think they were special. He was amazed at how power could change people. Although he liked seeing the Dawn Party constantly rise in the ranks, he no longer felt like he was part of the team as he once had. He recalled his fond memories with Chamber and wondered if they had made the right decision in letting him go. Chamber and Isle prepared to form a new party. The two of them fought a horde of goblins to test their teamwork. Chamber easily defeated most of them without breaking a sweat, leaving Isle incredibly impressed, jumping for joy beside him. Chamber tried to contain his joy at being praised by a beautiful girl. Isle took Chamber's hand to check the wound on his arm and heal it. But Chamber suddenly leveled up, which startled her as the wound vanished in an instant. She was frightened, making Chamber realize he needed to explain things to her. That evening, while camping, Isle listened to the story of Chamber's power, that he always received a power boost after accumulating enough points from defeating monsters. Though surprised, she felt a pang of jealousy, as her divine oracle skill was of no help. Her sadness prompted Chamber to ask why she became an adventurer. Isle replied that she joined to seek revenge. She told him about how she once belonged to a large family until they were murdered by bandits on their way to a family affair she was too young to attend. She found herself living in an orphanage where she refused to connect with anyone, with only hatred left in her heart. She hoped that one day her adventures would lead her to her revenge, but now she realized her family wouldn't want her to live only for vengeance. What she wanted now was to become a famous adventurer. Even if it sounded silly, Chamber didn't think her dream was silly, hoping they could achieve it together one day. Isle was surprised that the guy had no problem with her dream, and they agreed to continue working together. Isle also asked him why he became an adventurer. He recalled his childhood, when as a boy he witnessed a 10-year-old Jane defeat a grown adventurer in a sword fight. He had challenged Jane to a duel and was defeated 33 times without the prodigy even breaking a sweat. Jane warned him that he would never be able to beat her, no matter how hard he tried, because he had no talent. However, Chamber wasn't discouraged. He retorted and yelled at Jane that he would never give up, no matter how stubborn it made him seem. This intrigued Jane, and she asked for Chamber's name. Chamber introduced himself and declared that one day he would become the greatest adventurer in the world. Isle loved his story and found it cute that he and his friend were rivals. This made Chamber wonder if he and Jane really were rivals. Meanwhile, the Dawn Party was rejecting yet another new member. Jane was getting annoyed with his teammates, as he'd lost count of how many people they had turned away. He asked them to give people a chance to prove themselves before kicking them out. Martha objected, saying they were all talentless no matter how hard they tried. This statement reminded Jane of his childhood duels with Chamber and how his friend had proven to him that talent wasn't everything. He told Martha and Naru that they were on completely different wavelengths and announced that he was disbanding the party. The two girls were so shocked they dropped their drinks. Martha screamed at Jane for disbanding a party that was so close to becoming the strongest. Jane agreed that they might be the strongest in terms of skill, but not in other areas. He left, leaving the two girls kneeling on the floor in complete shock as he walked away. Jane felt happy to have a fresh start and wondered if Chamber was doing okay on his own. In another tavern, Chamber was sitting alone at a table. A cold mug suddenly touched his cheek, making him yelp. It turned out a drunk Isle had been teasing him and couldn't stop laughing. But she suddenly stopped laughing, looked at him with a blank expression, and said that he needed another 69 points to level up. With this information, Chamber calculated that each time he leveled up, the total experience required always doubled. The girl went back to being her cheerful, drunk self, as if nothing had happened. Chamber commented on how much she liked beer. Isle suddenly started to cry, making Chamber feel guilty, thinking he had said something wrong. In reality, Isle confessed that she was only happy when she was with him, whereas before she had felt like a burden. Now, being with Chamber, she felt like she was truly an adventurer. Isle was so happy that the tears just kept flowing. Chamber replied that she was the one who had saved him from rock bottom. He was about to say something more, but then he realized Isle had fallen asleep on the bench. He smiled looking at her and thanked her for saving him. The next morning, Isle greeted Chamber cheerfully, as if her drunken episode from the previous night had never happened. They encountered some goblins, and they were thrilled to have defeated them all. Chamber's status screen opened up, signaling that he had just leveled up. He was confused when he saw an arrow pointing towards Isle. A voice announced that he could now form a party. He checked his status again and saw a new feature, allowing him to form a party with up to 3 other people, and Isle was eligible to join. He didn't understand what this meant since he and Isle were already partners. He was about to press the button to add Isle to the party, but he remembered that he needed to ask for her permission first. He awkwardly asked her if she wanted to officially form a party with him. This question confused the girl, and she replied that they were already partners. Flustered, Chamber tried to explain what he meant, and in the end, he just said that they could officially become a party. Isle nodded in agreement, as if she were answering a marriage proposal. Chamber smiled and declared that they would continue their adventure together. He pressed the button, officially adding Isle to the party. Chamber waited for something to happen, but he felt no change in himself. Even though they were now official partners, Isle felt excited and wanted to start a quest immediately. They decided to explore the magical forest of Noya while there was still daylight. In the forest, they encountered and defeated various types of monsters. They decided to take the magic stones from the last monsters they had just defeated. They brought them back to sell to the guild for money. Immediately, the level up notification sound rang out, but this time Isle heard it too. Her body began to glow, leaving her confused. Chamber realized that adding her to the party meant she would also get to level up. He told her to check her status screen. Just as she was about to ask him what he meant, her status screen appeared before her. Chamber explained that she had just leveled up, and also explained the meaning of the numbers on the screen. But the only thing she could understand was that she had gotten stronger. Isle was so happy she started jumping up and down. She stopped when her status screen announced that she had just acquired a new skill, Light Arrow. She was even more excited because now, in addition to her healing magic, she had an attack skill. They came across a huge tree, and Isle decided to test out her new skill. She pointed her staff at it and cast Light Arrow. An arrow of light shot out from her staff and hit the trunk of the tree. They looked closer and saw that the arrow had created a hole. Isle couldn't contain her excitement, stomping her feet on the ground repeatedly. Their celebration was cut short when dozens of goblins appeared, drawn by the noise. They fled as the goblins gave chase, only to find more goblins appearing ahead of them. The 2 of them charged into battle, pushing through the swarm of goblins. A goblin caught up to Isle and grabbed her backpack. Chamber told her to ditch the backpack, and as she did, the food inside spilled out. The goblins were drawn to the smell of the food, allowing Isle to break free. Chamber threw his own backpack as well, to slow the goblins down even more. It wasn't until they were out of the forest that they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They realized that none of the goblins had followed them out of the forest. They returned to the guild, where they reported to Nako what had happened in the forest. After Nyako heard their story, she told the 2 of them to follow her upstairs to see an elven member of the guild. The elf led them to a door, and when they stepped inside, They found a man in a suit waiting for them. The man said he had a special quest just for the two of them. The man in the suit introduced himself as Shirunui, the guild master. He was hiring them for an investigation quest to return to the Noya forest and find out why there had been such an increase in goblin activity lately. The guild suspected that a goblin king was lurking somewhere in the forest. To emphasize the seriousness of the quest, Shiranui yelled, ordering Chamber and Isle to retreat immediately if they encountered the Goblin King. Back in the Noya forest, Chamber told Isle that she didn't have to come with him since the quest was too dangerous. However, Isle replied that they were partners after all, and she wanted to see it through. As they were making their way through the forest, they suddenly spotted a pack of goblins led by one that was much larger than the rest. The large goblin was wielding an old rusted sword. Chamber recognized it as a goblin swordsman, which was stronger and more dangerous than a regular goblin. He warned Exile, and they both readied themselves for a fight, confident that they could defeat it. Isle fired a light arrow at the goblin swordsman, striking it in the eye. Chamber immediately followed up, decapitating the goblin. After they finished off the rest of the goblins, Exile healed Chamber's wounds and reminded him not to overdo it, since they weren't on a monster hunting quest. Chamber replied that they still needed to fight more monsters to level up, so they'd be strong enough to face the Goblin King just in case they ran into him. Meanwhile, they discovered the traces of a burnout campfire. Looking closer, they noticed goblin tracks all around. They surmised that goblins had ambushed a group of adventurers while they were camping. Isle saw something sparkling on the ground and picked it up. She recognized it as an earring that had belonged to her former leader, Adelina. This worried Isle so much that she urged them to continue deeper into the forest. The two of them followed the trail and found the bodies of goblins scattered about. They saw a blood trail and followed it until they discovered a cave. Chamber sensed danger in the darkness and told Isle to stay back. He used light magic, summoning an orb of light to illuminate the area. They went deeper into the cave and discovered Adelina, Valtz, and Ricardo, heavily wounded and too weak to stand up. Isle immediately went to their side and began healing them. They asked her why she would help them after they had treated her so poorly. She replied with a bright smile that the most important thing to her was being able to help others as an adventurer. Adelina thought Isle was being foolish, but still thanked her for healing. She said that when they got back, she would treat Isle and Chamber to a round of drinks. Suddenly, they heard a noise outside the cave and went on alert. When they looked out, they saw a goblin mage leading a horde of goblins. As Adelina and her group prepared to attack, Isle charged in first, attacking with her light arrow spell. The trio was stunned to see Isle use an attack spell. Chamber joined the battle, wiping out the remaining goblins. The trio couldn't believe how powerful the two of them were. During the fight, Chamber and Exile heard the notification that they had leveled up, and they cheered with joy, much to everyone else's surprise. Her former teammates looked at Isle and saw something different about her. Adelina smiled, realizing her old companion was now strong and happy thanks to Chamber. On their way back, they encountered another group of goblins. Valtz grabbed his weapon and charged in, thinking he had to get revenge for what had happened. But a cloaked figure appeared, blocking Valtz's attack, and killed both Valtz and the goblins in a single blow, right in front of Chamber and the others. The group stood before the mysterious figure. The group felt a sense of dread from the enemy's presence, but they also knew they couldn't run away. They drew their weapons, deciding to face this phantom together. They assigned roles. Chamber and Ricardo would fight on the front lines, while Isle and Adelina would provide support from the rear. Chamber told himself he had leveled up enough to handle the stranger, but his sweaty, anxious expression said otherwise. The attack began with Isle firing a light arrow at the stranger. The phantom dodged it, and while it was regaining its balance, Chamber swung his sword at the enemy again. But his opponent dodged, displaying incredible agility. The man in the cloak attacked Chamber with his sword, and though Chamber managed to block, it took all of his reflexes to hold his ground. Meanwhile, Ricardo charged in from behind, hoping his strike would avenge Valtz. His attack landed, but it didn't inflict any damage. Ricardo realized that beneath the enemy's tattered clothes was a body as hard as armor. The enemy shifted its attack to Ricardo. Despite his armor, the creature's slash pierced through the metal, severely injuring him. As he struggled to stay on his feet, Ricardo grabbed the enemy's hood, and as he fell, the enemy's face was revealed to be a dark-skinned goblin with facial tattoos and long white hair. Chamber was curious to see a dark-skinned goblin, but before he could give it another thought, the enemy had already focused on him and delivered a slash, leaving a deep wound on his cheek that prevented him from using his eyes to dodge attacks. Fortunately, Exile shot an arrow of light at the goblin's face, stopping it in its tracks. At that moment, the goblin turned its gaze to her. Exile realized she had angered the monster and didn't know what to do. Chamber screamed for her to run as the goblin charged toward her. Suddenly, Adelina stood in front of Exile and managed to block the goblin's blow. However, the monster's strike was so powerful that Adelina suffered a severe wound to her abdomen. Adelina looked at Exile and said that she had now repaid her debt. Exile wanted to heal her, but Adelina knew there was no chance with the monster still attacking. Just as the goblin was about to kill Adelina, Chamber charged in from behind, striking the monster with his sword. Despite his effort, Chamber's strike only enraged the goblin rather than wounding it. The goblin overpowered Chamber in the sword fight and sent him flying into a tree. Adelina attacked the monster again. She blocked its strike, but her blade still managed to cut the goblin's left eye, causing it to roar in pain. The monster was so enraged that it stabbed Adelina straight through the abdomen. Exile urged Adelina to run, but she refused, unwilling to abandon her comrades for the sake of revenge. However, Adelina told Exile they were no longer comrades and encouraged her to run. The monster pulled its sword from Adelina's abdomen, killing her instantly before Exile's horrified eyes. Exile was now easy prey for the enemy, with no choice but to back away as the monster advanced. Meanwhile, as Chamber struggled to his feet, he decided he had to aim for the monster's head. He charged at the monster, but the monster swung its sword and cut Chamber's blade in two. The monster also wounded his shoulder. Chamber realized the enemy's blade was burning with a blue flame. The monster grabbed him by the neck and lifted him into the air. Chamber knew he was about to die, but when he saw Exile still alive behind it, he knew he had to survive to protect her. He let go of his sword and jabbed his fingers into the goblin's injured left eye. The monster roared in pain and dropped Chamber. Seeing the enemy was distracted, Chamber immediately ran to help Exile up so they could both retreat. Goblin still hadn't regained his sight and was swinging his sword wildly. Meanwhile, Chamber and Exile were struggling to escape the forest. They finally made it back to town and into the Hunters Guild, but they could barely stand. Yako approached Chamber to help him inside, seeing he was covered in wounds, and she shouted, demanding treatment for them. Chamber told her the treatment could wait, as he needed to report to Shirunui. Shirunui appeared and told Chamber to get treated first and make his report afterward. After they were treated, Shirunui led them to the office of a mysterious man. He was an older, muscular man who introduced himself as Guildmaster Dingle. Dingle suggested that the black goblin they encountered might be under the protection of a dark god. He explained that while humans worship the goddess Nea, other races have their own gods, including monsters. He believed the black goblin was blessed by the god Azidahaka and possessed abilities similar to the skills Nea bestows upon humans. He announced that help had been summoned from other guilds and that they should leave the black goblin to them. Shirunui gave them the option to abandon the investigation quest. Chamber thought that giving up might be for the best, but he was angry at himself for not being strong enough. He looked over at a trembling Exile and felt sorry for her, since all her former comrades were now dead. Exile suddenly spoke up, telling the guildmaster that everything bad that had happened was because she insisted on continuing the investigation. She admitted to blaming herself for her old party's death, believing they would have survived if they had just stayed in the cave. Chamber kept trying to interject, telling her it wasn't true. But she just continued listing reasons why it was all her fault, including how useless she was in battle and that Adelina had died because of her. She cried, lamenting that someone would always get hurt trying to protect her. Chamber thought for a moment before replying that he felt the same way, because he also felt useless. Isle reminded him that she owed her safety to him many times over. However, he replied that he felt the same way about her, since it was her arrow of light that had saved him from the Black Goblin. He admitted that he relied on her for support, which took her by surprise. He recalled all the times Isle had saved him from monsters, making her realize that being a team meant protecting each other in dangerous situations. He declared his resolve to be a hunter who would risk his life to protect his comrades. With every beat of his heart, Isle looked at Chamber, overwhelmed by his determination. Chamber continued, saying that he wanted to become even stronger, and to achieve that goal, he proposed to Isle that they get stronger together until the day they could finally defeat the Black Goblin. Isle agreed, saying she would become strong enough so that no one would have to protect her anymore. Chamber saw her hands clench with determination, and he was glad that she had found her resolve. Chamber told Dingle and Shiranui that they would be abandoning the investigation quest, which surprised everyone in the room. He explained that he wanted to request a new monster subjugation quest to defeat the Black Goblin. Dingle let out a loud laugh, amused by the young man's audacity. He told Shiranui to give Chamber a key to the guild and asked Chamber to follow him. They headed down to the basement, where they came to the door of the treasury. Dingle tried to find a specific key from the key ring, but growing too frustrated when he couldn't find it, he decided to just break the lock. The guildmaster went inside, while the others waited outside the door. After passing through a cloud of dust, Dingle came back out and handed Chamber something. The young man was surprised when he saw that it was a sword made of pure gold. Dingle told Chamber that this sword was the Thunder Blade, also known as Thor. The guildmaster gave it to Chamber, and although Dingle held it so casually, in reality, the sword was so heavy that Chamber couldn't even lift it. Even though it was smaller than the sword Chamber had been using, the Thunderblade still felt much heavier. He felt that if it weren't for his level-ups, he probably would have dropped it. Dingle explained that the sword had once belonged to a friend of his, who had died in battle. He recalled how his friend had bravely faced a giant dragon, sacrificing himself to protect his comrades. Chamber asked him why he would entrust such an important sword to him, but the old man didn't answer. The truth was, Chamber's words about wanting to be an adventurer willing to sacrifice himself to protect his friends had reminded Dingle of his fallen companion. He told Chamber not to worry about the reason, but to focus on the reward money he would get from the next mission. Chamber didn't understand what he was talking about, but Dingle used his authority as guildmaster to directly assign him the mission to slay the Black Goblin. Chamber and Isle continued their journey up the hill. Isle saw her partner sweating and panting. She knew he was struggling with the heavy sword on his back. The young man replied that although the sword was very heavy, he was proud to carry it, because Dingle had trusted him enough to give him a piece of his old friend. He was more worried about becoming strong enough to be worthy of wielding it and to face the Black Goblin. After a while, they arrived at a desolate forest full of dead trees, known as the Savage Hunting Grounds. They spotted 3 goblin guards walking together. From a short distance, they charged in to attack them. As he charged, Chamber felt the weight of the sword, but slowly, the blade began to build up electricity. The young man recalled Dingle's words that the Thunder Blade was an offensive weapon. The more you strike with it, the stronger and lighter it becomes. Just as Dingle had said, the electricity on the blade grew more intense. With every swing, it became more powerful. The feeling was so strong that Chamber's entire body was enveloped in a current of lightning, boosting his speed. Powerful enough to slice a goblin guard in 2 with a single slash, he continued towards another goblin guard and delivered another powerful swing. Just as they were about to take a rest, Chamber saw a boulder about to fall on them. He immediately pushed Isle out of the way, saving them both from the impact. It turned out the monster that threw the boulder was a goblin 3 times their size, shaped like a gorilla, known as the Goblin Leader. They exchanged looks, knowing that their purpose for entering these hunting grounds was to confront it. They saw the massive monster approach, wielding a tree trunk as a weapon. Both were determined to take it down to earn experience points. Chamber told Isle to use a light arrow to distract the monster. He charged in to attack while Isle shot an arrow. The arrow hit the goblin leader's left eye, but it didn't slow down at all, continuing to swing the log at Chamber. Chamber tried to strike the monster's forehead, but the wound wasn't deep enough to cause major damage. With no other choice, Chamber activated his sword's lightning power and began to swing it forcefully. He recalled Dingle's words that the sword could unleash lightning once it had stored enough energy. As he swung the sword, a powerful bolt of lightning shot straight at the goblin leader, overwhelming the monster and knocking it to the ground. Chamber was surprised by the power of his last attack. He felt the sword grow heavier in his hand. Now drained of its power, Chamber realized that move should only be used when absolutely necessary. Suddenly, a voice announced that they had both reached level 8. They were thrilled to find the experience points from the goblin leader exceeded their expectations. When they checked their statuses, Chamber was happy to learn he could now use healing magic. However, the most excited one was Isle, as she had just learned the spell Light Javelin, an attack spell more powerful than Light Arrow. They returned to the guild and recounted the story of how they defeated the goblin leader, stunning the crowd. Chamber gave the magic stone recovered from the goblin to Nyako and requested his reward. The Beastkin employee was surprised, wondering how he had become so strong. Chamber replied that he would never reveal his secret. He and Isle rested at the tavern. Isle asked what they would do next, since it would be hard to find a monster stronger than the goblin leader. Chamber reassured her, confident that he had a plan. The next day, they returned to the hunting grounds, where there were fierce territorial disputes between goblin leaders. Chamber explained that since they had defeated the goblin leader in this area, now all they had to do was wait for another goblin leader looking to expand its territory. Just then, a new goblin leader appeared with its army of goblins. But soon after, another goblin leader appeared from the opposite direction. Although the atmosphere was tense, Chamber smiled, realizing they were in the perfect situation to earn a ton of experience. They wiped out all the goblins. After a short rest, they encountered another goblin leader and defeated it as well. By the end of their expedition, they had both reached level 12. Meanwhile, a goblin leader and its horde appeared in the middle of town, throwing both the hunters and civilians into a panic. At the same time, at the guild, Shiranui and Dingle noticed the teacup on the table was trembling, and they wondered what was happening outside. Nyako suddenly burst through the door, reporting to her superiors that goblins were wreaking havoc in the streets. She also reported that the D-rank hunters had already taken action, but were struggling because there was a goblin leader in the midst of the chaos. Dingle asked her where the high-rank hunters were. She replied that ever since the Black Goblin incident, many high-level hunters had left, choosing safer towns to work in. Dingle told Shiranui to grab his weapon, deciding to handle the situation himself. He charged onto the battlefield and witnessed the devastation the goblins had caused. A panicked young magic hunter fired a spell at the goblin leader, but it only enraged the monster and made it focus on the girl. The giant goblin was about to swing its massive arm down on the girl without warning. Suddenly, a powerful flash of light from behind struck the goblin, stopping it in its tracks. From a distance, Nyako and Dingle realized that Chamber and Isle had arrived. The two wondered why there were goblins in the town, and they noticed numerous wounds on the goblin leader's body, which made them suspect something unusual was happening. Exile cast Enchant Light on Chamber's sword, enhancing his already powerful Thunderblade. Chamber charged into battle. He took down a horde of goblin swordsmen in the blink of an eye, leaving the surrounding hunters speechless in amazement. Dingle observed closely and realized Chamber's tactic was to take down the weaker opponents first, thereby storing up energy in his weapon in preparation to face the goblin leader. Chamber advanced on the goblin leader, and as the large monster lunged at him, Chamber dodged and slashed the back of its leg. As it fell, Chamber surrounded himself with lightning and leaped into the air, plunging his sword into the monster's neck. Chamber stood over the goblin leader's corpse, receiving thunderous cheers from the surrounding hunters for his incredible strength. Dingle praised Chamber, saying he had gotten much stronger. Afterward, Chamber and Isle spoke with Dingle and Shirunui at the guild. The guildmasters listened as Chamber explained his leveling skill that enhanced his power. The guildmaster asked why Chamber would share such valuable information with them, and Chamber replied that he felt he could trust them. Dingle, curious, asked for more details, but Chamber simply responded that it was just a feeling he had. His simple answer made Dingle laugh. They then turned to a more serious topic, discussing the recent events in town. They noted that it was rare for goblins to venture outside their territory. Chamber also reported that there was something suspicious about the goblin leader's scar-covered body. They wondered if the Black Goblin had any connection to this incident. Shirunui speculated that since the Black Goblin had been seen killing goblins before, this creature might see other goblins as its enemies. He theorized that the goblin leader might have lost its territory to the Black Goblin in a battle. And if so, these goblins weren't attacking the town, but were merely fleeing from the Black Goblin. Shirunui stressed that it was just his theory. Dingle worried that if that were true, they needed to stop the Black Goblin before its influence spread any further. Chamber and Isle looked at each other. The two of them declared they would handle the matter themselves, immediately. Nyako informed them that reinforcements from other guilds would arrive in a few days and that they should wait before entering the new forest. However, Chamber says that he and Exile are determined to face the Black Goblin on their own. As the two begin their journey back to the forest, Nyako, a cat warrior, wishes them a safe journey and tells them to return in one piece. The two then venture deep into the Noi forest. They come across the carcass of a giant boar-like beast sliced in half. Upon closer inspection, they realize the magic stone is still intact inside its body, and there are no signs that any of its meat has been harvested. The two quickly realize this is the work of the Black Goblin. They continue deeper into the forest, farther than they've ever gone before. Suddenly, a giant spider appears right in front of Isle's face, startling even the tough priestess. Chamber immediately slices it in half. Examining the spider's corpse, they recognize it as a paralysis spider. Looking up, they see countless more of the same spiders clinging to the trees above. Ignoring the spider's presence, they press onward. However, they both find it strange that they've traveled so far without seeing a single goblin. They recall the last time they were here, when they had to flee from a huge swarm of goblins, but now the forest feels completely different, suspiciously quiet. They both agree that something strange is going on. A little further on, they spot something in the distance. A village of crude wooden huts. Inside the huts are goblins, constantly looking around as if on high alert for some kind of danger. The two decide to observe the village for a while, taking turns standing guard. Night falls, and as Isle sleeps, Chamber remains on high alert, watching for any movement in the village. The sky begins to lighten, but nothing has changed. The goblins are still on guard. Chamber is just starting to think this is a waste of time when his eyes catch something. The Goblin King is heading straight for the village.